Shit We've Read is a proud member of Bilo Network, a network of geeky podcasts.
Please visit shitwe'veread.com to support the show.
Now let's talk about some books.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Shit We've Read, your favorite fantasy and sci-fi book podcast, hosted by some geeky friends. My name is Jason Rico. I'm one of your hosts on today's episode, where we are talking about The Psychology of Time Travel, the debut novel by Kate Mascarenhas. Joining me, as always, is Laura Benson. Hi, Laura.
Hello. Glad to be back. Excited to talk about this new book.
I am glad to have you here with me. I know you've been under the weather a little bit, so thank you for finding the strength to pull through and be here.
You're so brave.
Well, I really wanted to make sure I could make it.
Well, I'm glad you could, and we'll forgive you the occasional cough or sneeze.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Unfortunately, Bala cannot join us on this episode, but that's okay because we have an amazing guest host joining us. She is a return guest host. She is one of my coworkers, a fellow book lover, and also, most importantly, she is the president of our Works Book Club. Shout out to the Finer Things Club, Erin Harris. Hi, Erin.
Woohoo! Hi, Rico.
How's it going?
Honored to be asked back. I thought after last time, I was like, wow, I was really snobby that day. I was like, they're never calling me again. It's over for me. Turns out it's not over for me. And that, maybe the people like it. So here I am to help.
It's always nice having someone snobbier than me, you know?
I could imagine that would be pleasant for you. Yes.
No. No, I feel like we did it to ourselves because last time we brought you on, it was because we chose a book that took place in Sacramento. And at the time, you were volunteering with the Sacramento History Museum. So we were like, oh, she's going to know some stuff. Let's bring her on, which is like the perfect recipe for snobbiness, I feel like.
So true.
So we got what we asked for.
You set me up for failure. And that was
To be fair, I feel like we all kind of agreed on a lot of things, though, with that book.
That's true. We had pretty solid opinions across the board.
For sure. Yeah. It wasn't what you said, it's how you said it.
I know. I get that a lot, actually.
For people who are not super familiar with you, tell us a little bit about the type of books you're into. What's your background coming into this?
Yeah, sure. I like books written by women, mostly. I'm interested in a lot of literary fiction, lovingly referred to as lit fic by, the book talk community. But I know that is a hot take and a lot of people hate lit fic. So moving along, I like many kinds of fiction and that includes historical fiction, some sci-fi, some fantasy, whatever. I'm open. Do I prefer sci-fi? No. The answer is no. But if it is dropped sparingly and there aren't too many details around the actual science, I can wrap my head around that. I love a good historical fiction. If there's any sort of Renaissance or medieval themes, I'm really into that. But I dabble in all genres. I've been on a memoir kick lately. That was probably more than you wanted to know. But
that's exactly how much I wanted to know.
That's great.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, we've talked about books, obviously, at work.
Yes.
I know that you are into lit fic. I know you're into books by women, about women. I know you like character-driven narratives. I know you're not a huge fan of sci-fi, which is exactly why I wanted you on this episode, because this book... hear me out. This book is technically sci-fi, but it's really about the women in it. It's about the characters. And so I was very curious to know what your thoughts would be. And I will hear those thoughts a little later, but we're not there yet. As always, before we talk about the book at hand, let us discuss some of the other shit we've been reading lately. Laura, why don't you tell us some of the other shit you've been reading?
I have been trying to finish the book Azura. I don't know how to say it. Azura Ghost by Essa Hansen. It's the second book in the Graven series. It's kind of hard to sum up what's happening, but the series in general is a very interesting blend of space travel. There's multiple dimensions that the characters are constantly traveling between. So there's aliens, there's also androids, there's like kind of like powered people. So it's kind of like a little bit of all of my favorite things in one book, which is why it's also taking a while, because it's a very long book. It's over 500 pages, which for
thick.
me is a pretty big book.
Yeah.
That's a thickie.
So I did check out the ebook from my library, but I didn't finish it in time, so that got returned. That's
We've
how
all
long
been
it's taking. But I am enjoying it. I am very much enjoying it, and I'm looking forward to probably picking up the third book after this. So that'll be another, like, I don't know, 2 months of reading that.
All right. Thanks for sharing. Erin, what else have you been reading lately?
Well, I have been reading The Guest by Emma Cline for our work book club called The Finer Things Club. And it was my pick, which everyone resented deeply because it's literary fiction.
My nemesis.
Yes, as it is to many. But I think that was part of the joy of this pick for me, was making everyone suffer for my final month of book club before I move on. Now, this book, The Guest by Emma Cline, follows a young woman who makes terrible decisions and essentially couch surfs while avoiding her drug dealer ex-boyfriend. This book is giving intrigue, it's giving chaos, and it's giving questionable decision-making skills. All things I enjoy reading about, because in real life, it would stress me out greatly.
Yeah.
My second book, I'm actually listening to the audiobook of this, is, it's a true story. It's a nonfiction called The Jazzmen by Larry Tye. And it dives into the history of jazz legends, including Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie. Their rise to fame, stuff that was happening while they were super famous, and beyond that, sort of challenges they were facing. So I've been finding that really interesting. It is a nonfiction, but the way that it's written is really more like a fiction, to the point where I'm reading it and it's like a very engaging storytelling. It's chronological, which I really like about nonfiction books. A lot of them hop around timelines, which pisses me off. So this one's really good so far. I'm blowing through it. But yeah, that's what I'm reading right now.
Awesome, thanks. The Jasmine sounds really interesting. That sounds like something I actually would really enjoy. I don't read a whole lot of nonfiction, but I am a fan of jazz and the jazz legend, so.
Yeah, I think honestly, even if you didn't like jazz, this is just super interesting from, like a social, economic standpoint, even political at times.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Cool.
I last read The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson, which is the last of his 4 secret projects, which were a result of his record-breaking 2022 Kickstarter campaign. Like I said, it was the last of his 4 books, and unfortunately was also my least favorite of his 4 books.
Oh.
And I think that's almost... I don't want to say by design. I don't think it was designed to be the least favorite, but it makes sense why it was the least favorite, in that this is the one book that most connects to the Cosmere, which is his universe that the majority of his books take place in. And I have not read any of those series. So I didn't have all the knowledge to get the references. Not that I was lost with the story, but you could feel if I knew more, I'd have a much more fulfilling read. But that said, it was still fine. So I'm sure if fans of his work out there ever read this book, they'd love it. It just wasn't for me. But
Yeah, I was gonna say Brandon Sanderson's a pretty good writer. So
yeah, the writing was still solid.
You had to enjoy something, even if it's just the way he writes.
Yeah, it was definitely not. I mean, it's technically a standalone, I guess, but you can tell that you were dropped in the middle of a universe. You didn't have all the information. I'm like, okay, I'm following the story, but I wish I knew more. But
Did you contribute to his campaign, or did you get it after the fact?
I did not contribute. I bought them all afterwards, which was, in hindsight, pretty dumb. But it was a $200 commitment to 4 books that he had not even announced. They're just 4 random books. And at the time, I had not read anything by him. I think maybe Skyward.
I think you read the Skyward books.
But none of these books were connected to that series. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to drop $200 on books that I know nothing about. Like, at least give me titles, at least give me synopses. Then maybe. So that was a lot of trust to place in somebody. But after the fact, I had read more books. I found out what they were about. They sounded interesting. I was actually going to skip this one, but I had bought the previous 3, and it seemed dumb to just not buy the 4. So here we are. So.
Well, at least you can say you read them.
I did, and I have them, and I can lie to people and say, oh, yeah, I backed it. Okay, thanks for sharing. Now let's move on to why we're here to talk about The Psychology of Time Travel by Kate Mascarenhas. This falls under the genres of science fiction, mystery, and women's fiction, and was published in February of 2019. Laura, you're sick. I'm going to give you a bye. Erin, would you mind reading a synopsis?
I'm ready to rumble. Okay.
Okay, whenever you want.
Should I do a fun voice?
Yeah, that's an option.
I kind of read this book in like a transatlantic accent. I don't know if I'm fully going to be able to replicate that, but I'll give it a whirl. Okay. In 1967, 4 female scientists worked together to build the world's first ever time machine. But just as they're about to debut their creation, one of them suffers a breakdown, putting the whole project and future of time travel in jeopardy. To protect their invention, one member is exiled from the team, erasing her contributions from history. 50 years later, time travel is a big business. 20-something Ruby Ravello knows her beloved grandmother, Granny B, was one of the pioneers, though no one will tell her more. But when B receives a mysterious newspaper clipping from the future reporting the murder of an unidentified woman, Ruby becomes obsessed. Could it be B? Who would want her dead? And most importantly of all, can her murder be stopped? Traversing the decades and told from alternating perspectives, The Psychology of Time Travel introduces a fabulous new voice in fiction and a new must-read for fans of speculative fiction and women's fiction alike.
Bravo. Give it up for Erin Harris, everybody. Wonderful. Wonderful. I feel like we need to start like a new noir series and have Erin narrate it, you know?
Yep.
Once I started, I was like, this is giving Jersey, but I have to commit to the bit. And that's fine. I'm cool with that. New Jersey it is. Anyways.
As soon as he started doing the voice, I pictured like someone giving information to the cops. Like, who couldn't be bothered. They're still doing their job, you know. They're still, like, slinging fish at the fish market. It's like, yeah, I saw something, you know. But
there is nothing I love more than a bit and yapping, okay?
Oh, so, amazing.
This is just the beginning, folks.
Wonderful. This is now counting our last After Dark episode. This is now going to be the second episode in a row where someone's tried doing an accent. The last episode, one of the main male characters spoke with a brogue accent, and I had to do the synopsis. And so some of the quotes I tried reading in a brogue accent.
You did a good job.
I appreciate it again.
Think you
Thank
did
you for
a good
lying.
job.
Thank you. I appreciate it again, Laura.
And also, I just remembered this book took place in London. So
It did.
I forgot.
Oh no! I did the wrong bit, guys. Anyways, you're gonna have to live with it. That's what you get. I'm not doing a British accent. I've done enough of those in drunken stupors. Anyways. Ooh, tough. Yeah. Well, we're in Jersey now.
We're in Jersey now. All right. Okay, before we get into spoilers, let's go ahead and give our first impressions. Erin, you just gave that wonderful performance. A+. So I'll let you take a break. Laura, let's start with you. What did you think?
I really, really enjoyed this book. It was not what I expected at all. I was expecting way more time travel stuff, but this was very much about the people and the like the title of the book, the psychology of time travel. So we get into a lot of things that I had never really thought about. Time travel obviously is a really popular sci-fi kind of theme. And so, we grew up watching Back to the Future and stuff like that. The Terminator, things with time travel that don't ever really address certain things that this book brings up.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting exploring the psychological aspect of what it would be like traveling to different decades, different years all the time in your life, and the consequences or ramifications and the different things like that was just fascinating to read about. I highlighted so many things related to the psychology of it.
Okay.
But also in addition to that, because it is time travel, I will always have questions about how this works and that doesn't make sense, but wouldn't this happen? And the paradoxes and things like that. It was so I definitely still came out of this book questioning certain things, but I think that's always gonna happen with any time travel book or story in general. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I think all the characters were fascinating also. And it was just overall a very, very good read for me.
Awesome. So that is One Like. I came into this book fully prepared for there to be lots of questions about the time travel. I know exactly the way your mind works, Laura. It's very similar to the way mine works. We always have lots of questions. We always dive into the little details and ask the what if. So we'll see if we can make some sense out of the questions I'm sure we'll both have. Erin, what'd you think?
Well, when I read the title, when you passed me this assignment, I thought to myself, cringe. Is this going to be some sort of janky, hypothetical, time travel, self-help book? What is this thing?
Okay.
I was like, the psychology of time travel? What is the author going to get at here? I ended up really liking this book.
Amazing.
I was like, what did you think?
I know.
I love the drama. What can I say? Anyways, I came in highly judgmental, expecting the worst, but I really fell in love with these characters. I think something that a lot of authors really struggle with is developing characters that the reader cares about across the board. And just picking one or two, their female and male main character, and they're like, you're the one. And then they hyperfixate on them. They develop their story, their character arc. Everyone else gets ignored. I felt like this author did a great job of really giving a lot of different characters a lot of her attention. It felt very thoughtful. And at the end, when I read that it was a debut novel, I was even more impressed because it is put together like someone who knows storytelling very well. For the time travel, I agree. There were holes there. I was like, how did that happen? Are we just going to ignore the butterfly effect? Don't get me started. But in terms of wrapping up the characters' individual plots as they pertain to one another throughout this 100-year span or so, I think she did a really good job of putting a bow on all of it and not making it cheesy, which is challenging. So that's what I think.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am so glad you liked it. As I mentioned earlier, it's like, this can either be something she really likes or a total dud. And you do not pull your punches when it comes to book reviews. So I'm glad you liked it. I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you.
I also quite enjoyed this. Like Laura said, not exactly what I expected. We chose this book a while back, and some of what it was what the synopsis was about, I just forgot. I knew it was 4 women pioneers of time travel. I knew there was something about them trying to solve or prevent a murder. I didn't realize that the mystery was going to be so prevalent throughout. I didn't realize it was going to be so character-driven beyond just the 4 pioneers. The sci-fi component of this was pretty light. That said, the author did a really good job about thinking about a lot of things about time travel, like Laura, like you said, aren't discussed in other things. She talks about, I mean, I'm not going to give any spoiler away, but she really does talk about the psychology of time travel and the effects of that, and how your perception of time would change and your perception of mortality would change, and just how living in a non-linear timeline would just affect you, that a lot of other time travel stories don't address. So I did really quite enjoy that component of this book. All I need in a book is to address certain things, and then you can move on from them. So the butterfly effect, the idea of going back and creating paradoxes, we just briefly acknowledge it and move on from it. So I was like, okay, you at least acknowledge it. And I can suspend my disbelief and just go with it. It's when things are just not thought of at all that I start, questioning and poking holes, and you lose me a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm glad that we all enjoyed this book. That's a solid win for us. Good job, everybody. Okay, this is your official spoiler warning. We're going to get into the details of this book. So if you haven't read it yet and you would like this book to be brand new and fresh for you, pause this recording now, come back. Otherwise, we might ruin some things for you. So proceed at your own risk. Okay, so this book is about this mystery of a body that has been found. We don't know who the victim is. And it's about a character, not one of the pioneers, trying to solve this murder. Obviously, you're on this episode, Erin, but even if you hadn't been, I would have thought of you, because the last book that you and I read for our Works Book Club was a mystery, but we didn't know the victim until like the very end. Correct. And I feel like you and I found that really annoying.
It was fucking annoying. It was stupid. And
yes,
I hated
but this
book.
book does the same thing, but in a much better way.
I agree.
And to your point, like you said, the fact that this is a debut novel is quite impressive, because this author did not choose an easy book to debut with. Like time travel, multiple time periods, multiple narrators, like this is an ambitious book, but she did it really well.
I think so too. And it really highlighted how much I hated the last book we read. Because when we got together for our workbook club and we were kind of diving into this book, not to stray too much off topic, but when we got together and we were talking about it, they were like asking me and Rico, because we're the only people who hated it, they're asking us, well, have you ever given like a mystery a 5-star review? And we both immediately go, yes, in unison. Like, it's not a genre thing. It's a mastery thing. And I think to have mastered a mystery in your first try is a great success.
Yeah, a mystery, Again, I can't emphasize enough how difficult it is, because we read books for the podcast. I know we've all read books individually with different like jumps in times, right? Like in the podcast we read, was it the Lost Apothecary that took place in like 1800s and then contemporary, and just going back and forth can be confusing. And I'll admit, like, there were times this book lost me sometimes, jumping back and forth. I think it's kind of inevitable if you're not really fully paying attention. You're like, wait, hold on, what year is it right now? Who's speaking again? But all in all, like, this book was solid, and it really, she locked down the structure of the book. She knew exactly what kind of story she wanted to tell, and she wrote a bunch of great characters. This book is almost entirely female character driven. The male characters are secondary. There's like a dad and like a love interest, but each character I felt were like,
the male characters that were in the book outside of the time travelers, like the love interests, were killed off, which I thought was hilarious. Like, they barely have any men in here at all. And when they do, they murder them. Like, what? But there were I think there were a couple of time traveling men in there, but it seemed by all accounts to be a primarily like a woman heavy, profession.
Yes. The Conclave is what it's called. This company that does the time travel, and it is mostly women. Even to the fact that the nickname they have for new time travelers is wenches,
right?
Which is a historically female term, but they still apply it to male time travelers because it is so female dominant. But the point I was trying to make about just so many female characters is that the author gave each one a really good voice. They were each distinct. Sometimes if there's too many characters, I will get lost because the author doesn't do a good job differentiating the multiple characters. This was not the case with this book for me. I thought this author really nailed all the characters.
I agree. They were all very distinct from each other. It just, in the beginning, it took, you had to get used to it for a minute. And remember to always check the year and the name, who the chapter is about. And then after I'd say maybe the first quarter, I started in my head just acknowledging, okay, Odette, this is this year. Yeah. There's only a couple of characters that jumped around, like Grace, because she's the time traveler. Yeah. So I always had to check what year she was in. But for the most part, majority of the perspectives that we were reading from were generally from the same time. So Ruby was always in, I think it was in was it 2017? And so when we would read her perspective, her perspective was always what am I trying to say? Chronological.
You got it.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we always knew her story. If you just read her chapters, it was in order. So it was easy to kind of figure that out once you remember who is in what year or time period. Yeah. And that's not easy to do. That's really not.
No, I think she did a good job of reminding the reader, or reminding me, and Odette, this is her conversation with her parents, and you kind of click in, you're yeah, that's right. That she's the one who found the body. Or just inserting little clues, acknowledging that the reader is probably not actively taking notes about every single character you have is, I think, something that a lot of authors forget to do because they're so wrapped up in this story in their own head. They forget that other people aren't maybe following as closely, reading as closely.
Yeah. I will say the one aspect of the characters that confused me was their ages. I didn't always remember how old characters were, especially the time travelers, because we have it's Grace, right? Isn't she one of the the pioneers? Yeah. But then later on, she's in a romantic relationship with Ruby in the future. But Grace was a pioneer along with Ruby's grandma. So every time Grace would be brought up, I kept thinking of Grace as an old woman. And it would confuse me and creep me out sometimes. And I had to remember, oh, no, wait, she's a time traveler. So she's still younger now.
She's a different age.
Yeah.
Almost every time we see her.
Yeah. And so that was the one thing I had to actively keep track of was what age of a person are we with right now? Because it changed.
I mean, I feel like that was kind of intentional, but that does bring me to one of my qualms, which is that Ruby Rebello, first of all, stupid name, Ruby Rebello's relationship with Grace was incredibly pervy. You're telling me, you would just be cool with one of your buddies having a romantic relationship with your granddaughter? How is that okay? I get it. She's time traveling. It's a different time. She's young when she meets Ruby. But ew, I would not support that. I'd be you're a pervert. Go back to your own time.
Well, that's kind of the meat, the meat of the time travel, then the psychology of time travel and the ethics of it. Because this author thought out the idea of time travel driven relationships. And there's terms for being in a sexual relationship with yourself in the future, or a sexual relationship with yourself in the past, or like coercing somebody into a relationship based on knowledge you have of them. Like, this author gave a lot of thought to the ethics of time traveling. And so, yes, to your point, Erin, from us, people who are stuck in one-way lanes of time, that is really creepy. That my granny's friend is hooking up with somebody my own age, gross. Yuck. Don't like that. But in this world, I feel like that is accepted because time and the relationships we form across it, I mean, to borrow a Doctor Who term, is more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. It's still confusing, though. Even if it wasn't creepy, it's still confusing.
No, I get you, and I agree that it was definitely intentional. It was supposed to make you uncomfortable, but it just feels like one of those situations where you say to yourself, just because we can, doesn't mean we should.
I mean, I feel like if you look at it like from the perspective of maybe, say, vampires, and a 100-year-old vampire is dating an 18-year-old, yes, that is pervy and really uncomfortable compared to a time traveler who left their original timeline and is 20-something, seeing a 20-something in this current time. Not as bad.
I feel like it is, though.
I think the moral of the story is that if you experience 100 years of time, whether via being a vampire or being a time traveler, you will become a perv.
Yes, correct. And the thing is, it's all about power dynamics, right? Which is why it's pervy. Grace has this level of power over Ruby that she's always going to have. And they acknowledge it in the book. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't make it acceptable just because you get consent from your partner. It's like when you see a 32-year-old man dating an 18-year-old girl. It's like, ew, there's clearly a power imbalance here. Yuck. Like, she doesn't realize that because she's 18 and thinks she knows everything. But that 32-year-old, 30-something-year-old knows a hell of a lot more, not to mention the aspect of time travel, where then adding in, they literally know more. They know about your death. They know about your trial that's going to happen later when you're accosted for murder. It's just so icky. It blows my mind. And then it's painted as like this magical romance. I'm like, ooh, disturbing. I don't know.
But that's why I like this book so much. Because it does ask really weird questions like that.
Yeah, it brings up the weird stuff that weird people would ask or think about.
Yeah, like it took the Laura Back to the Future thing of going back in time and kissing your mom to like the next level. It's like, no, going back in time and
kissing you.
Kissing your like going to the future and kissing yourself.
I was so surprised when it brought up having sex with yourself. I was like, whoa, I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't remember that at all. I must have glazed over it. Like, it was so traumatic, I blacked it out. I don't remember that at all.
It was literally just a one-liner throwaway thing. It was just a quick mention. So we didn't like really go there, but like it was one of those things like they have a word for this.
Yeah, there's terms for it. I want to bring up it's the glossary. It's like, is it so prevalent? Is it so prevalent that we need a term for this? It's not just one weird person doing it.
I mean,
because if I traveled in time, like, would I hook up with myself? Would it be the first thing I think about? Absolutely not.
I mean, I certainly wouldn't, but people love to ask the question, like, if you could have sex with yourself, would you?
But also, if you have sex with yourself, is it homosexuality or masturbation?
I'm leaning towards masturbation.
Hold on, what's the term? It's here somewhere. Forecasting is intercourse with one's future self. Legacy fuck is intercourse with one's past self.
I just want to know, like, how they came up with some of these terms.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I didn't always love the terms. Legacy fuck.
Kate was having fun with this one.
Oh, and the me timing is ongoing infidelity committed with a past or future self. So not just a one-time thing. It's you're in a relationship with yourself, apparently.
The absolute narcissism that you have.
Yeah.
No one's going to know me better than me.
I guess so. But
I mean, that's true.
I guess that kind of fits the profile for a time traveler, though. They're all they're a little crazy because you have to be in order to be like, yes, I am God. I will travel through time and tell you great knowledge I have.
Well, this book, though, specifically says you can't time travel if you're crazy or have any sort of history of mental health.
But that's so subjective. And as we saw with Odette, hideable.
Hideable for sure.
Yeah.
And also we kind of learned with that in-house psychologist that they had that she was a little sus as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you always got to look into the staff.
I mean, how do we feel this book addressed mental health overall? I definitely feel like it's acknowledging that systems sometimes fail people with mental health issues. They are, stigmatized sometimes. Obviously, like Barbara, one of the main characters, one of the pioneers, she has a breakdown during their first live interview and is basically shunned away from the program, never seen from again. What other thoughts do we have on the mental health components of this book?
Well, first of all, justice for Barbara.
Yeah.
They did her so dirty because Margaret was threatened by her. I felt like I totally agree with you. I think this was the purpose of this book, maybe completely or just partially, was to sort of convey the issues that people with mental health face in the workplace, whether it's fair or not, and how they are discriminated against. I mean, on almost any job application, it asks you if you have a disability, and mental health is included amongst the disabilities. And they say, oh, it's just for a poll, but who knows if it's really just for a poll or if they're screening you out based off of those answers. So this felt really relevant, even though it's kind of a fantastical approach, which I think is cool.
I mean, I do agree in that it wasn't always clear what it was saying. But obviously, like, the Conclave has a thing against a certain type of mental disability, which is interesting because if you think about it, Margaret and a lot of the time travelers likely had certain mental disabilities that made them good for this job.
Are you implying Margaret has a narcissistic personality disorder?
Maybe.
Amongst other things.
She was a little psychotic sometimes. I mean, just the way that she thought about things, the way that she tried to make things seem like they were okay, and like she was very manipulative about like making sure nobody went to talk to Barbara. Like, don't talk to her. It's for her health. It wasn't. It was because she only cared about herself. She only cared about her time traveling, her conclave. It was only really about her. And we learn that as we learn more, as we get into the book. But we also see that she's also trying to form her time travelers to be like her. And that's very much what they are trying to do with their new recruits, and the way that they handle certain things. They're hazing, they're doing things and making it normal to treat these people like this to get them to basically not care and to not think about people's feelings and to not have feelings of their own. They just need to go and do this thing. They need to get over death. They need to get over this. They need to get over this. And so it's interesting because it's like everybody in this book had something mental health related going on.
Yeah. There's a great line towards the end of the book that Ruby tells Margaret. And she says, it's something along the lines of, you're only empathetic when it asserts your own needs or He's like, yeah, like Margaret is very, very manipulative. Obviously, this book had things to say about mental health, but it also explored the type of legal system that time travelers would be subject to and how it connects to the idea of fate, in particular via a trial by ordeal, wherein you aren't judged, for your crime, but rather your guilt or innocence is determined by a series of tests, a series of questions, with the belief that fate would determine
I was
the
very
outcome.
confused.
Get the questions wrong and oops, sorry, you're guilty, get them right, and you're set free. It's such a weird concept.
I think this was really put in place to benefit the time travelers. I mean,
Yeah.
as we saw in that last case, they said, every justice system's flawed, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, it's a question of fate, but it's really not. And they say there's no changing the past, there's no changing history. But Grace engraves the ring that she gives to Ruby to give her the final answer to that inquest, basically, that she needs in order to be declared innocent. So in effect, Grace did change the course of events by giving Ruby that ring with the final answer, knowing what was to happen to her. And maybe that was always the way it was going to go. So she wasn't actually changing history. That's when we kind of get into muddy water. But this ultimately only served the time travelers because they have, again, this extra knowledge, this extra power over regular people.
Yeah.
That is not fair.
Yeah, I don't think she ever went back. I don't think she ever went back and changed history. This book really leans into the idea of time loops, specifically one called the bootstrap paradox, which is when an action or an event or a person causes itself. So using Grace's engraving on the ring as an example, Grace, as the time traveler, already knew that the ring had the engraving, so she engraves it for her past self to see so that she knows she needs to engrave it. So it forms this weird loop that doesn't ever quite...
Right. It's like the chicken
beginner.
or the egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is one of the very confusing things and one of the frustrating things about time travel that, most people just don't address. You just accept it and move on. And I appreciate that this book did acknowledge things without really getting into, this book was not a hard sci-fi book.
No.
This book was really just about the characters.
But as someone who's not a huge fan of sci-fi, I kind of found that to be a pain point because you can't have a time travel book with characters that in no way are going to affect the course of history based on their actions when they're going through time, having relationships with other people, not to mention themselves. Like, when you interact with other people, you're changing the progression of events. And time travel didn't always exist, so we know that they're changing the progression of events. It's just, it'll hurt your head, but it's like, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. Like, they must have changed things, even if they didn't, go into a situation and, for example, shoot Ruby before she could attack Margaret or whatever.
This is why I subscribe to the idea of if there was time travel and we went back in time and changed something, it would cause a splinter timeline, a parallel reality. Mm-hmm. I think that's the idea that works the best because it allows for changes to the timeline while still maintaining the reasons for wanting to make those changes in the first place.
Right.
I don't know. I get really confused when talking about time travel. Don't get me wrong. I fucking love time travel stories. Comic books, Doctor Who, novels, you name it. I can't get enough of them. But God, they can be confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it kind of just went against every other, piece of time travel media I've ever consumed. Where it's like, you interact with people, you change everything, you ruin everything, you fool. It's like, that's all they were doing. They were talking to people. They were yapping. They were frolicking around in the wild. Usually in time travel books or movies, you have to be in hiding, super covert. They were not, in fact, pulling a Marty McFly. They were just frolicking freely. or why.
Yeah. This author knew exactly what kind of story she wanted to tell, like what kind of time travel story she wanted to tell.
Right.
She wasn't concerned with causing accidental changes to the timeline. She was more concerned with answering the question, what if you got together for a nice little hangout with a bunch of different eras of yourself? That'd be weird. That'd be really weird to be in a room with past me and future me and grandpa me, and two of them might be fucking. And knowing that, like, oh, me fucking myself is in the future. I'm not doing it yet, but I will. That's weird.
The multiple me's in a room was really challenging for me to conceptualize. Like, how is it even possible? Because if the yous from the past or the future are there, then who's in the past or the future? Like, it was just too much.
I thought it was interesting in that what we were seeing or reading was as if everything had already happened.
Yeah.
And like it's weird to kind of, this is really hard to describe. It was just kind of a weird way to think of time travel and us seeing it happening in front of us. Like, to me, in their first time travel test, they went to the future an hour, I think it was.
The very first one, I think, was it a minute?
I think it was a minute.
Or was it a minute? Okay, they went into the future, and they immediately were talking to themselves. Mm-hmm. There were two versions of them, and we've seen that before. Okay, so then they go back to their original time, then they wait that minute, then they appear. So then they're back in that same scenario, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard to wrap my head around that because, like, it's just like, how did that happen this way? If you go to the future, you're in the future, you're doing this thing, you're changing the future, then you go back and you're experiencing it and I don't know. See, I'm just confusing myself.
I don't know if I'm understanding what you're asking. I think it'd be the equivalent of like me. Let's say the future is a room. I walk into a room and there's already a me in there. And I'm like, what's up, you? How's it going? Like, cool to see you. Nice shirt. Cool. All right, well, I got to get back now. So I walk out of the room. But now it's time for me to enter the room on my own timeline. So I walk into the room and I am no longer there. And I am waiting for past me to join me to walk into the room. But I already know what's going to be talked about. And so, like, I already know what he's already going to say, oh, nice shirt. And I already know what I said because he said it to me earlier. And then past me leaves, but now I'm just on my timeline, so I just continue like normal.
I think it's interesting that you're referring to different versions of you as he, as though they're not also you. I think that's interesting.
I mean,
I was younger then, you know?
I was younger then, you know, my favorite phrase in the world.
I wish Bella was here. Bella's nose would be bleeding right now with the sci-fi.
This is exhausting.
Yeah. Okay, no, I remember, I don't remember the term, the book that they said every time travel has this book.
Yeah.
That just like appeared. It doesn't have an origin because a silver self or their older version gave this to them or a book or an item, whatever it is, gave it to their younger self. And so then that younger self will hold on to it. They get to a certain age, then they pass it on to their younger self. So it becomes a loop.
Yeah.
So they say that they don't know, like it just appeared. It's never been created. It doesn't have an origin, these items.
But it must have.
But it had to. Like that's what I get stuck on is there is an original timeline where that person acquired this item, then they created this loop by giving it to their younger selves. Mm-hmm. And then that's why it doesn't have now an actual origin or creation or anything. And that's where I get really confused and tied up in a lot of the time travel stuff. Because there's always an original timeline. And so I do agree getting to like the point of fate in this book. I get the idea of fate, but I also don't think it really fully applies. Because yes, they are changing things.
That's what I'm saying. That's why the trial of ordeal is so ridiculous. Because it's honestly, it's the narcissism of Margaret seeping into the organization. It's saying, we're going to do whatever we want, but we're not going to hurt anyone or anything. Don't worry, guys. We'll be responsible dictators. Everything will be fine. However, it is impossible to time travel and not change anything, which we have seen time and time again in this book.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the bootstrap paradox
The
and how an
subject
item or an
is
event.
hurting my brain.
For sure. I promise the torture will stop soon. But I just wanted to say that I think a lot of time travel stories like this idea of Doctor Who does it all the damn time. Doctor Who will constantly be like, I went back in time and gave my old self this thing because I know I needed it in the future. And so now I had it in the future, and now I'm going to go back and give it to my old self. And it's just this loop. I'm like, well, yeah, but who started it? You need that timeline that starts it, and then that timeline continues, and then now we have a new timeline where it's in a loop. And I guess that makes sense. But you have to acknowledge that you can't go back in time like that.
That's so dumb.
Like, I just don't understand.
You're not supposed to.
You're not supposed to. It's the chicken or the egg. Which came first? No one knows. They won't tell us. Kate's being whimsical, and she's decided to keep her secrets, and that's fine.
All right, then. Keep your secrets.
I'm tired of trying to understand you, Kate.
Well, much like this book, we seem to be stuck in our own time loop as we keep going around in circles discussing the same stuff. So let's move on from trying to understand the time travel. And let me actually go ahead and leave you with this, because as I was reading this book, I realized that if I had access to time travel, I would be the most obnoxious person. Because I would spend just like a month straight just jumping in time an additional year. And then the year after that, I'm going to show up again. And the year after that, I'm going to keep showing up because it's just a day for me, but I keep jumping an extra year in the future. Monday, time to jump to 2025. Tuesday, 2026. Wednesday, 2027. And you're never going to get rid of me. I'm always going to be there. I'm going to be so obnoxious.
Okay, so this begs the question. If you had access to the time travel machine, and you could only go to one moment in the future of your life, what would you want to see?
I honestly don't have any interest in seeing any of my own future. I have interest in seeing the future at large, and it's mostly to see what pop culture is made. If I'm being completely honest, if I could jump to the future, this is a very me answer, I feel like. But if I could jump to the future, I'd be like, I'm gonna watch Star Wars episode 20 through 30. I'm gonna.
This is the most obnoxious answer you could have provided.
You're welcome.
This is so annoying.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna be honest. I would probably do the same.
I want to see like me getting married and realizing who the love of my life is, or like kids, or when I die. Like I don't want to have that knowledge ahead of time. I want that to just like happen. I want to discover it.
Why not?
I'd be down to go into the past and see stuff I already did. But
well, hypothetically, the past isn't an option in this book. Let's just say we invented time travel in 2024. Yeah. We can't go back to a time that doesn't have the machine. So no going to the past. Your answer is your answer. You want to see pop culture? Whatever. Fine. Yeah. Fine.
You're so upset with that answer, and I'm sorry, but I'm not.
I hate it.
What's your answer?
Yeah, what's your answer, Erin?
It's so unrealistic. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's human nature to want to know what comes next.
For sure.
In your life. And I understand how maybe that's like the worst possible thing is to know your fate, which is the whole thing about time travel. It's like, I don't want to know my fate. Like for Margaret, who is supreme narcissist, psycho bitch, it was probably the best thing in the world that her death certificate was left blank because she can't snuff out the person who murdered her. Anyways, if I had to go forward in time, what do I want to know? I want to go to my funeral. I think I want to see if it's a hoot and a half or if people are sobbing. I need to know. Also, I think it would be fun. And I think, I think everyone would just be having a rager. And I think that would be fun to see.
I don't think I would want to know when I die, but I liked how the book discussed death in that time travelers, death didn't matter to them because they could go to any time period to see people that have died. The only death that matters is their own. And I think Grace was visiting one of the other women when she was dying. It was like cancer or something like that. And her friend was upset, like none of my younger selves have come to visit me, And so I was like, I kind of liked that discussion in this book of how time travel changes your perception of death and life and things like that. It was really interesting. That said, again, I wouldn't want to know when I'm dying. So I don't know that I would go and see my older self either.
I'm just so morbid. Like, I need to know. When do I die? How do I die? Tell me the juice.
I think I'd be open to talking to my dying self purely from a conversation standpoint. But I'd still want to make sure that I didn't know how or when I died. Like, if I could be promised that, hey, you're going to have a chat with your older self before he passes, but I couldn't tell how old I was. I couldn't tell how I'm going to die. Like, I wouldn't want to see him on his hospital bed. I wouldn't want to see, where he lives or any of that. Like, I don't want any details. I kind of just want it to be just like an unmarked room and we're just chatting. So I can just see, like, how's life? Do you have any last words of advice before you go? I think that would be interesting, but I don't want anything that lets me know how or when I'm going to die. That is information that I don't want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I just feel like that's kind of the beauty of the funeral. Like, because there's always a slideshow. And then you kind of get a highlights reel of your life without having to go to multiple different locations in time, which I feel like is the ultimate cheat code. Because then you get to see all of those other things that are maybe filling you with anxiety throughout your life. And you're like, oh, it all worked out. I need to chill out. That could be good for me. However, if I go to my funeral and it's in like 10 years, that could be bad for me.
I need to know that it's
I wouldn't want to know that.
Oh. But then you would appreciate life more. So that's a potential upside.
I suppose.
But anywho.
Would I, or would I be like, fuck it, I have 10 years?
Well, I guess you could take a hedonistic approach. I don't know. That depends on you.
I got 10 years to get every drug I can in my system.
Right. Let's get rowdy.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I had the best answer. Go to the future and see future Star Wars, see future MCU movies, read future comic books.
Of course,
I'll go do it with you.
Technology in the future.
You had the best answer.
Well, because I have the narcissism necessary for time travel, and you all don't.
Okay, Margaret.
Every group needs a Margaret, and if it's me, then so be it.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
I don't know if you noticed the author included discussion questions at the end of the book.
Oh.
I didn't.
You have the arc.
Ordered an arc off of Thrift Books. Long Hail Thrift Books. It says on sale February 2019. The publisher's email is down here. I should cover that. And it doesn't have the questionnaire in the back. It says TK. It says reading guide discussion questions and then just capital T, capital K. So maybe that's like to come, but they don't know how to spell. I don't know.
I don't have questionnaires in mine either.
So there is a questionnaire that is 10 questions that is very short. I did the questionnaire in 2 minutes.
Let's hear it.
So you basically, it's each question you answer with A, B, or C, And then each one of those is a point. Then you add up your points. So I got 17, which is you have some of the traits needed for time travel and might do well at the conclave if you make an extra effort to fit in.
I would do I didn't take the questionnaire. I would do terrible in the conclave. I would be manic depressive, crying in a ball on the floor.
Jeez.
No, thank you. No, thank you. I can't know too much, or I will spiral.
What I did also want to do. There's a couple of questions on here that I thought was interesting, that I wanted to ask you guys. Several characters play a role in Margaret's death. Who do you think is most to blame?
Margaret.
It's a good one, Jason.
I think also Margaret.
Okay, but while I understand why you say Margaret, the physical act of killing Margaret.
Right, but in the future, I believe it was 202 or 2,247, don't quote me on that, the court system was accepting of murder in defense of like blood murder. I think that's how they referred to it. So her lawyer, Ruby's lawyer, Faye, to be more specific, told her if you get a judge from 2,247, they will 1,000% be lenient with you because they allow for like basically revenge murders. Like if you murder my cousin, I get to kill you. I thought that was really interesting. So that kind of puts it in perspective, like how politics change. But also, I'm a very vindictive person, and
Good to know.
I believe that you reap what you sow, and if you're messing with people's lives on a scale like Margaret was, you deserve to be murdered in cold blood. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't align with the justice system. However, I don't care. In 2,247, I would have been a judge. So.
Laura, who do you think is most to blame for Margaret's death?
Well, again, I agree that Margaret in general is at fault. I would say it was, I'm trying to remember how to say her name. Angharad?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Who put the box back together.
That's true. Technicality.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like Ruby knew the possibilities of shooting all the bullets into the box. I guess, well, and she also knew that at that point she would have known that that was Margaret that had died. But technically that box wouldn't have been there had it not been rebuilt.
Right.
Okay.
She got off. Nobody knew that she was involved.
Also, the second reason I believe that Margaret had it coming, not only for all of her misgivings within the conclave, but she went to Granny B's funeral and then demanded the fuel. Like, give me a break, woman. Wait until after the funeral before you start asking for things off the will. You're being insane. Like, get out of here. After that, I would have killed her too. Be like, your days are numbered, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Come to my grandma's funeral, threatening me? I don't think so, you little wench. I think
One other question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the author did a good job of making Margaret hateable.
Oh,
Yes.
for sure.
I think a key to that is whenever you have an evil character, they can't have a nickname. Especially if they have a nicknameable name, like Margaret. She could have been called affectionately Mags or Maggie or Marge. Nope, because everyone hated her. That's how you know they're the villain.
True.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Anyways, sorry, you had a second question. That was a tangent.
Oh, it was the last question on the question, or the discussion questions is, do you think Odette will accept Elspeth's job offer? Is a new improved conclave possible?
No. Well,
Yes.
yes, she'll accept the offer. No, the new and improved is not possible.
Yes to the first as well. No, perhaps to the latter, because I think they would know if it had already changed. Like, the time travelers would have known that the conclave has shifted in the way they operate. And because that was not brought up, I don't think it has.
Good point.
But I don't think Odette would be able to resist the curiosity of joining up and solving these mysteries.
I agree.
Yes, she's very clearly a detective.
Yeah.
Have you guys
long as
seen
you could.
Supernatural? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's like, great example. It's like once you're in the business, once you're in the family business, there's no getting out. Like, you're always going to have that connection to that world that wasn't open to you before. There's no getting out for Odette. She's screwed.
Yeah.
And it might just
I
kill
agree
her.
with that.
Well, Laura, I want to read these questions because I want to know if I'd be accepted as a time traveler.
And of course you do.
All right. Well, Laura, Erin, and I just got back from a 15-minute tangent where we each took the survey at the end of the book to determine if we would be eligible to join the conclave as time travelers. We have our results, and all of us fell short of the "we are well suited to time travel" window, and instead landed in the "we could possibly become time travelers with some hard work." So we have something to strive for. Except Erin, who doesn't want to time travel, and that's fine.
I don't want it. I abdicate.
It's not for everyone.
It's not for everyone. I enjoy my peace. And if I could see the future, I would have no peace. I would have a nervous rash on my arm.
Which
it would
is
be ugly.
so funny because you were the one that was like wholeheartedly, I would go to my funeral.
Well, yeah, I'm curious. I'm nosy. I love tea, but it would give me an anxiety rash that would never go away. I'd just be like nervously itching all the time. It would be awful.
Okay.
I can't put myself in that position. This is what I'm saying. It's like I need to protect me from me.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we're done talking about the book. So, yeah. We spent the last 30 minutes doing questionnaires. Okay. Rating time. On Goodreads, this book currently has a 3.7 out of almost 14,500 ratings. Lower than I think it deserves, which is kind of sad, but I think I can understand. I feel like it could be a challenging book for a lot of people.
Yeah, I could see how it wouldn't be certain people. Like Bella, this is probably...
No.
As much as I think they would love it, I also think they would hate it.
Yes. 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 Okay, what would re-rate it? Erin, go for it.
To me, this was a solid 4. I mean, I think the fact that it's a debut alone makes it really strong for me. Do I think it's perfect? No, but I think that's kind of a pain point with any time travel book. Like, I don't know if I could ever read a time travel book that would be a 5, but that's nothing discriminatory against this particular time travel book. I think it was really thoughtful, super well researched, like you mentioned earlier. I could feel the amount of research that went into this, and I respect that. So this was a solid 4 for me.
Wonderful. Laura, what did you give it?
Same. I would give this a 4. I think the author did a really good job balancing a lot of different things. Like Erin just said, you can tell there's a lot of research that went into it. Even just mentioning certain things, just one random thing addressed certain questions that we may have had. Really great characters, and there was still, a mystery that we were trying to figure out along with them. So I would say 4. Very, very enjoyable.
I would also give it a 4. I thought this was a great genre-bending debut. It's a fun spin on like the locked room murder mystery. It definitely has some interesting thoughts and questions about time travel. The way it brings up and questions like relationships and fidelity, mental effects on living a life out of order, perceptions of death. The author even thought about currency, how that would work, and how time travelers would need their own currency. and their own, governments and law systems. And I thought this book was really, really well done. Solid 4 for me as well.
Nice.
Okay, that's the end of the discussion on the book. Let's talk about some of the other shit we're reading next individually. Laura, what's next for you?
As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I'm going to just keep working on this really long book, Azura Ghost by Essa Hansen. I think I might be like halfway done.
Okay.
So, if I can get that done quickly enough, I'll probably start on the third book. I think there's 3 in the series. So, get that series done.
Erin, what's next for you?
You're gonna bully me for this one. The pretension is tangible. Next for me is The Colossus and Other Poems by Sylvia Plath. So for me, I feel like I've been reading a lot of novels, not a lot of short stories lately. So sometimes I like to break that up with a really, just a thin collection of poems. I saw this at a bookstore, and I love the bell jar. I've never read any of Sylvia Plath's poetry, so I thought it'd be really fun to read her poetry because that's the majority of her work. She only published 1 novel, and I'm really excited about it. I mean, it should be super depressing. Speaking of, we were talking about manic depressives all this past couple of hours. Talk about the OG manic depressive problematic woman, my queen, Miss Plath. I love her. I think she's so funny, but also I'm deeply concerned for her. I mean, she is dead, but I every time I read The Bell Jar, I'm like, this is deeply concerning. And lo and behold, she killed herself right after she published it, so that adds up. But anywho, on that breezy note, that's what I'm reading next.
All
Good
right.
luck. Let us know if you need to talk.
Yeah.
It'll be fine. I feel I love a bummer read, Yeah. I love something that's just beautiful and sad. It's like listening to a good sad song. It's like, I'm not necessarily sad, but this is cool.
Oh, did you love a sad song? All right. Well, if I look over at you at your desk and you seem a little down, I know why.
Yeah, if I start weeping, it's because of The Colossus.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Next up for me is The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. That's going to be the next book we read for a Sit at the Table Books Sci-Fi and Fantasy Book Club, which is a book club at a local bookstore here in the Sacramento area. It is a classic sci-fi exploration of moral risk set in a world where one man's dreams rewrite the future. I am a big fan of Ursula K. Le Guin. I have not read this book yet, so I'm looking forward to reading it. The last couple years, July has become the unofficial Ursula K. Le Guin month for the book club. Previously, we read The Left Hand of Darkness, and I think last year we read The Dispossessed. So that's next up for me.
Cool.
Next up for the podcast is The Undetectables by Courtney Smith, which is a witty and quirky fantasy murder mystery in a folkloric world of witches, fairies, vampires, trolls, and ghosts. It has the wonderful tagline of "Be gay, solve crime, take naps."
Iconic.
So, absolutely, we're going to fucking read it.
Say less. That's all I needed to hear.
Sounds like a good time.
Sounds like a great time. So
I'll be tuning in.
Great. Lovely. Well, thanks for everybody who's tuning into this episode. We appreciate you taking a listen. Erin, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back.
Thanks for having me back. Like I said, after we chatted last time, I was like, that went a little wayward.
No, it was great. It was fun.
No, I'm so glad. It's always a blast. I love talking about books. So thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
As always, if you have thoughts on this book or anything else that we have discussed, let us know on social media. You can find us everywhere at Shit We've Read. We also have a Discord. You can find a link to that in our episode description, on our website, and our social media. And that is going to do it for us. Laura, thanks as always for joining me. Erin, of course, thanks again. And I will catch everybody next time. Bye.
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 Shit We've Read is hosted by Laura Benson, Jason Rico, and Bella Romero, with music by Joshua Chilton and editing by Jason Rico.
To join the discussion on this and all other books we've read, find us at Shit We've Read on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok.
For more information about us or to request transcripts, please visit shitwe'veread.com.
This podcast is part of the Bilo Network. Visit bilonetwork.com for more great geeky podcasts.
Thanks so much for listening.